Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I've been wanting to talk about this tour that Bernie is doing. He is going to heavily GOP and Trump districts, places in the Midwest, swing states, and he is doing talks trying to drum up opposition to Trump's agenda and the GOP's agenda, I believe, in the past couple of events. And I think the last one that he did as of right now was 5 days ago. So I'm not really sure what the tour looks like from here. If I can find some dates for it, I'll throw them up there. But what he was initially talking about specifically is the GOP's budget bill, which most of you probably know has passed the House as of now, but it still has to go through the Senate. And so one of the issues that I have with the way the media reports on this kind of thing is that they talk about these bills passing in multiple stages, but every stage they just say the bill has passed, the bill has advanced. And that, I think, doesn't really help people understand where these bills are, and it contributes to people thinking that this type of news doesn't matter, because you hear all these headlines about this bill, that bill, this bill passed, it's going to pass, it might pass, and then people eventually, it loses meaning because they've seen 2 or 3 headlines telling them that a certain bill has passed, but then it never actually comes to pass, and so people don't understand what it is that they're hearing. So as of right now, the bill is moving to the Senate, which is where Bernie Sanders is. So he does have, I guess the fight continues to keep that bill from passing. This is the bill that cuts Medicaid and a ton of other stuff, and tax cuts for the rich. And it actually raises taxes on everybody but the rich. That's what the GOP is going with this time. The first time Trump was president, they cut taxes for everybody, but the taxes for the poor that were cut went back eventually, I think in 2025. And now they have raised taxes slightly for, I think, every tax bracket but the ultra rich. So Bernie is going places trying to drum up opposition to this. This is really what he should have been doing this whole time, although I understand he's had different jobs to do, you know, ever since his presidential runs. It's like once those are over, you kind of got to go back to doing what you're supposed to do. But this is what Bernie Sanders this was always the promise of Bernie Sanders, is that he can pull these enormous crowds and get people really excited. And so even as president, that's what he said he was going to do, is go around and have events and get people excited and organized about certain issues so that he could push certain things through. So let me play a quick clip of this and then give my thoughts on it, because I think this is the type of leadership that the Democrats need.
We have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had. And what I'm asking you here in Iowa City is to tell your congresswoman to do just that. Vote no on this one.
So Bernie has branded this as like the fight against oligarchy, and he is talking about these budget bills that the Republicans are trying to pass and encouraging people in their districts to call them, tell them not to pass these bills, etc. Now, the fact that this passed in the House does make things more difficult because the majority that Republicans have in the House is very thin. So the way things work in the House and the amount of people that there are to vote makes it harder to pass because you have a thinner majority. Whereas just like with all of these appointees that Trump has selected for his cabinet, these crazy lunatics, they are able to pass with pretty narrow Republican support. They don't need that many votes. The majority, even though still slim, is stronger for the Republicans in the Senate. So not sure exactly what the play is for Bernie from here. Like I said, that last event was a couple days ago. Not sure if he's going to keep these going. But either way, I mean, in some form, he needs to keep these going, because this is the type of engagement that Americans need to have in front of them. Bernie is proven to be good at communicating in a way that gets people interested and excited about politics and reminds people about how they can get involved. You know, you just don't see any candidate that has the type of activation that Bernie Sanders has had since he was a candidate first in 2016. And you see a little bit of that with Trump, but with Trump, a lot of it is astroturfed, and it's these, incredibly rich entities that are propping up the Trump movement in many places, not places on the map, but sort of like places in terms of the issues. Like, if there's something that the Trump people want to lie about or want to get support about, even though it's against the interest of their base, they have vast sort of astroturfing infrastructure that can sway public opinion. And this is partially how Trump has gotten away with so many lies. But Bernie Sanders is the only person who can pull crowds that rival that. And I think if Bernie cannot succeed in fighting against this budget bill, he should obviously stay at that for now, because maybe he can chip away at some of the support that they have in the Senate, which, could potentially be good. My sense is, though, that Bernie probably feels now that it passed in the House, at least some version of this bill and these cuts is going to pass. But we'll see. We shouldn't admit defeat on that yet, and hopefully Bernie is not, because I don't think he's a perfect political leader. I don't think he says all of the right things all of the time, but I think that he is by far the most powerful leader that not just the actual left has, but the Democrats have. There's just nobody who can do what he's doing. Even Obama, supposedly the superstar of the Democratic Party, is not doing this. He's not going and talking to people, and if he was, it would be falling flat. This is not what Obama was ever good at, and you could say that that's how Obama was usurped by such a dark version of a grassroots movement, because Obama came into office with a major grassroots movement, which helped him win twice, but his failure to deliver on those policies that activated that grassroots movement is why it fell apart. And then they sold off all the email lists, and it just became a racket. And maybe because Bernie never actually made it into elected politics, as a like in the executive branch, he still has a lot of that credibility. A lot of people are done with Bernie. Various things that he said or failure to do this or that over the years has turned some people away from Bernie. But for the most part, when he gets back in politics, when he rolls up his sleeves, the support shows up. That's what I noticed with Bernie. It happened again in 2020, and it's happening again now after an election. Bernie Sanders is going to these places, and people are showing up, and they're huge crowds. And if there's one thing I know as a musician, as a creative person, it's that when you get some momentum like that, when it starts building, you got to keep pushing. You don't stop. You know what I mean? You keep pushing, and you take it as far as it can go. So part of me wishes Bernie had been doing this for the last 8 years. But to the extent that he can do it now, as much as he can do it now, he absolutely should, because there's just nobody who is fighting the Republicans like this in the Democrat landscape, like at all.
I think it's amazing to see Bernie come out swinging like this. I've been a fan of him for a while now, and I do still always find it like a bit surprising but heartwarming, the support he has. I wouldn't expect it as much. He, like Trump, has that thing going for him where the people that like him love him. Like Bernie Sanders has fans, and people like look up to him as a leader or someone older and wise that they can trust. He seems very trusting to people, and like Trump, he can draw a crowd, as we're seeing now. He's always been able to, but I think it's now he has this thing going for him where he can say, look, look at how right I was. This is happening in front of our eyes. I mean, he's been shouting about oligarchs since what, the 80s, 90s at least, and now he can say, you are watching it in real time. And there's a lot of people that can make that argument. Look, he's been warning us. Why haven't you listened to him? A lot of people cry about him being a socialist or a communist, but when we're living in this world where there is no middle class whatsoever, and the rich keep getting richer and taking everything from the poor, it's kind of hard to argue with his politics if you are at that ground level like most Americans are. I think he did something very smart where he went on the Meathead podcast round, or at least the Knucklehead one with Theo Von. He did Joe Rogan. I guess that would be the Meathead circuit a while back, years ago, when he was still running for president. And that was good. But this time around, he did something Kamala didn't. He went on fucking Theo Von and put himself in front of a lot of eyes that probably wouldn't see him or get to hear his side of things, his outlook on things, his views, his politics. I don't think a lot of Theo Von's audience would have heard that side of things normally. And, you know, say what you will about Theo Von, there's some good things, there's some bad things. But the way he asks dumb questions sincerely, I think caught Bernie a little off guard, but was really, really good for getting people that don't know much about that view on things, being able to see some, you know, a view of how finances should be, or just how bad off we are in America. That's one thing Bernie always attacks with specific numbers. I love that. He'll sit there and say, you know, Musk has $402 billion. Zuckerberg has $252 billion. Bezos has $249 billion. And those numbers are after an increase of $139 from Musk, $49 billion from Zuckerberg, and $28 from Bezos just since Trump was elected. And he breaks it down like that. And then he'll sit there and say, like, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 85% are uninsured. And those numbers are insane. You know, every other industrialized country in the world has universal health care, has some kind of universal college or secondary school for people. Like, and when you bust it down like that, it's really hard to argue with. When you look at those numbers, when you see raw data and you compare it to the rest of the world, to other raw numbers like that, it's really hard not to be like, well, why not us? Or why did their wealth increase so much? Is that right? It's kind of like when I am talking about billionaires not, you know, needing to exist. They shouldn't exist with people. A lot of times they don't understand that. They, you know, it's real easy to look at $1 billion as just the next step up from $1 million. You know, most average, you know, poor or middle class Americans, middle and heavy quotations, always think they're just a couple good moves away from being rich, and that's why they side with these rich people that don't have their best interests in mind. And then you think of a millionaire as rich. That's like the standard threshold for being rich, right? Is you're a millionaire, right? And then billionaire, well, that's just the next step up. It's like the difference between $10,000 and $100,000. But it's not really. One of the best ways I ever explained to people, and it's not mine, it's a tweet from long ago that's been memed over and over again, but it breaks it down in such a clear way that you can see and easily relate to, is comparing money to time. It's the one where if you measure dollars like you would seconds, how much, so you look at like $1 million, how much would that be in seconds? How much is 1,000,000 seconds? Well, that's 11 days, right? Well, how much is 1 billion seconds? The next, you know, in quotation, step up. It's 33 years, right? So 11 days versus 33 years, that's such a huge gap. And explaining it that way, that people can see and actually relate, and it kind of helps you wrap your head around these insanely large numbers, has always helped me get through to people. And it's kind of how he does it. I've taken that from him. And he is somebody the left could look to as a leader. There is the issue of his age. That's the big thing. That was the big thing when he was running before, but Biden got the fucking nomination. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think a great future for the Democratic Party is putting Bernie into a leadership role. He's really just commanding and taking that now, but maybe not have him run as the next presidential candidate for the Democrats because of his age. But I don't know if he could do like a vice president role or some other, leadership thing for the Democrats. But him stepping up like this and continuing to hammer on is beautiful. And like you said, I wish he's been doing it for these last 8 years. It probably would have made a difference, but it's something at least.
I like the idea of asking dumb questions sincerely. That is a really good interview style, specifically for politics with these like large fan bases. It is kind of the perfect balance because a guy like Theo Von, has an audience that's like not interested in politics. Some of them are probably pretty dumb, but because he's like entertaining and it's not political content for the most part, he has a super wide reach. And the best way to communicate across the most people in that audience is to like really dumb it down. And Bernie understands that in general. That's another thing that I think caused Bernie's message to be so successful, is he's really good at making it simple, keeping it simple, and staying on message. And you don't see that from, I guess you see it from politicians, but the messages they attach themselves to are so much more politically calculated. And then with Bernie, it's like he has a pretty standard democratic socialist theory of politics, but he's been crafting the approach to politics over many years. And I don't think even he thought in 2016 that approach and that message that he had was going to be so successful that he might even like get close to the nomination. I think that he probably thought he would be like a small factor that could maybe push the conversation forward a little bit, similar to what RFK Jr. did. But yeah, I think Bernie is clearly the best leader that they have. The Democrats are totally shitting the bed right now. They have this guy, Hakeem Jeffries, who's running around saying a bunch of nothing. And a lot of the message that they're trying to communicate to people is that there's really nothing we can do. The Democrats are consistently communicating that message. Like, well, they're in power, so there's really nothing that we can do. And that's what they want us to think. They want us to absorb that message so we stop asking things of them. And this is why the AOC approach to politics, which she admittedly she has not embodied since coming into office. But when she ran, she said that she was going to be disruptive, that she was going to, hold protests outside of offices and hold up votes in order to create pressure. And I get why that's hard for her to do. But really, this is an opportunity for the Democratic Party as a whole to take on those type of tactics. But the only way that they're going to do it, because if the Democrats did it as a whole, it would work. It would work when Republicans did it during Obama's term. And I just don't understand the argument for not doing the same thing now, other than the fact that they're afraid of Trump. But, Democrats also are so heavily incentivized to go along with the flow. A lot of their donors are also benefiting from Trump and what he's doing and the tax cuts. And, a lot of people who have donated to Democrats or would have donated to Democrats have now pivoted because Trump is the one in power, and really they're just chasing their own monetary benefit. And that's the type of incentive that Democrats have attached themselves to. And you got Hakeem Jeffries going around and sucking up to like tech company oligarchs and trying to convince them essentially that Democrats are going to cut taxes for them and stop regulating them as well, because they're conceding that these things that not only Democrats campaign on and win elections with the promise of, but also these things that the base really believes is true and knows to be true. That billionaires can be taxed more. Like you were saying, the amount of wealth that they have is absolutely absurd. And if we redistributed that, we could have just a much more healthy society. But they can't. It's not just the fact that Bernie communicates so clearly and effectively with the numbers. It's the fact that he can afford to do that. He can afford to boil it down to those terms. Billionaires have this much money. If we reallocated this much money to taxes and tax them this much, we would have enough for this. The reason he can speak so simply like that is because he's not attached to these same like incentives of sucking up to billionaires and taking their money. And really, that's the thing that prevents Democrats from speaking clearly and being mealy-mouthed, is they're always trying to talk to their rich donors and the public at the same time. You definitely saw this from Kamala Harris. She was trying to thread this needle of talking to the donors and to the public at the same time. And it's just a losing message. People can smell when you're doing that. They can, even if you're making the right noises on the issues they care about, which a little bit Kamala was doing, they can tell the doublespeak. They can tell that you are talking out of both sides of your mouth. And to Biden's credit, I think he did that less in 2020. All Democrats do it. And I've said this before, Bernie would probably also have to do that a little bit if he was a general election candidate. I would like to imagine a world where Bernie could whatever be the candidate and he doesn't answer to anybody but the people. But the truth is, Bernie Sanders or no Bernie Sanders, that's not how American politics work. And it would be very hard to win a general election with that. I mean, he couldn't even win a primary with that message, with that method, because he was so outnumbered by the big money. But ultimately, I think this type of people power is Bernie's strength, and he needs to keep building it. And I mean, I think they should make him the minority leader of the Senate. I just don't really see any reason that Chuck Schumer should be in that position. There's just none. He's not doing anything. These guys aren't doing anything. And, I think if Bernie is not able to tilt the conversation in terms of pushing back on Republicans, which there are openings there. Republicans are getting mad at their representatives in various states over these cuts to Medicaid and stuff. But, if Bernie is going to keep this momentum going, I honestly think that he should start turning some of it against the Democratic Party and trying to force them to make some changes. Because it's the fact that they didn't give AOC the top oversight position, the fact that Chuck Schumer is still the Senate minority leader, even though he's doing nothing, the fact that Hakeem Jeffries was this guy who was they elect people because it's their turn, right? We're going to put you in this position because you've been here long enough rotting, and so now it's your turn. And that's exactly who they have leading the House Oversight Committee, is this guy, Jerry Connolly, he's a dinosaur. They could have had AOC for that position. She would have been great for it. She would have been on TV every day. She would have been pushing back, but they don't want to do that. They want to maintain this tepid balance of donor money that they have. And ultimately, they're going to survive off of that. You know what I mean? They're going to survive by being leeches and grifters, and it's going to take the type of momentum that only a Bernie Sanders or an AOC or somebody else that we haven't seen yet, only the momentum that they can create is going to force the Democrats to change. But it's time for it to happen. They need to be forced to change. There's no other way. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe and comment. And if you really want to support the channel, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support me. I'm going to be posting all kinds of exclusive content there, exclusive podcasts, songs, beats. If you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts, all of those are posted there. Plus more. If there's exclusive content that you'd like to see, ideas you have, let me know and we'll work some things out.